While they waited for Shepard to finish retrieving the missing Krogan females, Rex and Revan had very little to do besides finding ways to keep themselves occupied. Revan was busy fielding the dozens of questions a Solarian technician was assaulting her with about the shield system being delivered elsewhere, and mostly just deflecting them by pointing out relevant sections of the installation and maintenance manual some of her Quarian engineers had insisted on. Rex, on the other hand, was taking the time they spent waiting as an opportunity to terrorize the guards surrounding them. While she was glad Rex was finding something to keep himself occupied, she really did wish he chose something other than listing off the different parts of a Solarian he was planning on eating if they tried to pull something. It had been amusing seeing the agents around them twitch and shuffle uncomfortably at first, but now it was just starting to get distracting. Especially when she was starting to feel uneasy and noticed several whispered conversations happening around them. Listening in was somewhat of a challenge, though. Directional microphones only did so much around loud Krogan. A worried-looking technician power walking towards one of the officers drew the Sith's attention and she did her best to listen in. Another incursion? Air defenses report unidentified craft skirting our inbound approach vectors. It's like someone's testing our defenses. Seems that way, sir. I don't like it. Not with. The rest of the conversation was lost under Rex's booming laugh as he finally got one of the STG agents to react, and unfortunately the two she was listening in on had moved before he was done. It was confirmation that something was going on though. An attack? The Reapers hadn't been sighted in this system yet, but there was nothing stopping them from having indoctrinated agents infiltrate ahead of their main forces and destabilize important locations. An important STG base would certainly be a valuable target. It could also be the Asari Jedi. If a few of them happened to be on Sorkesh or nearby enough to get there before the Normandy did, Revan could see them risking an attack to try and assassinate her now that she was away from her flagship. Or perhaps a betrayal? The Dalatras certainly wasn't pleased about getting pressured into releasing the Krogan females. If she decided destroying any chance of a genophage cure was important enough, Revan could easily see the Solarian ordering an attack on her own planet. It was unlikely though, since the only way the Dalatras wouldn't be immediately implicated was if the attack was done by a different species and capable of overcoming an STG base. Not something easy to arrange in the short time between the agreement and their arrival. There was also the possibility that it was simply coincidence and nothing would come from the disturbance. Revan huffed a laugh and stood. She wasn't that lucky. Ignoring her STG minder, the Sith moved to the edge of the balcony overlooking the valley. The base was settled in and focused on another conversation happening nearby. Outbound comm traffic 20 minutes ago from inside the base. One Solarian was saying. A burst transmission, fully encoded, with no identity signature. No signature? That's against protocol. I know. Someone's passing a message. The soldier said gravely. I've got a bad feeling about this. Inside the base, was it? Suddenly the betrayal option was looking a lot more plausible than Revan would have expected. Shepard was already heading down into the lower levels, so there was no point contacting her. At this point the best thing would be to collect the females and evacuate the base as quickly as possible. After that, Revan's train of thought was derailed as a klaxon started blaring throughout the base. Alert! Threat Condition 2 has been declared. Scramble readiness teams. Suddenly there were soldiers running all over and even a few VTOL aircraft taking off from the base. It was an impressive response time, even if the STG agents had already been suspicious from earlier activity. The Sith felt Rex step up behind her. What's going on? Someone's been probing the base's defenses. She replied. I overheard it from some of the soldiers. And I think we are going to find out who in just a moment. She pointed at several dots that had appeared on the skyline. Enemy aircraft. And a lot of them. Rex snarled angrily as several ships simply blew by the STG fighters, using their numbers to slip through easily while a few lagged behind to engage the defenders. Soon enough the entire base was being swarmed by shuttles dropping off squads of soldiers. Human soldiers. In fairly recognizable armor. Rex, call Shepard and let her know our timetable just got accelerated. Revan ordered, focusing all her attention on one of the incoming shuttle pilots. There was a sort of haze around his mind, similar to the Asari she had met when Shepard had gone to recruit Okier, yet different. Less subtle. But more than enough to prevent the Sith from influencing his mind without more effort and focus than she could afford at the moment. She didn't need to though. A sharp tug using the force and the pilot's neck suddenly snapped, allowing the dropship to nosedive into the valley below. One group down, dozens to go. And unfortunately, it looked like she wasn't going to have time to focus on repeating her last trick. Too many Cerberus soldiers had landed at the base and Revan couldn't afford to stand still focusing on the pilots without risking one of them hitting her with a high explosive. We have a problem. Rex growled as he stalked back over to the Sith. Only one of the females survived. We need to get her out of here before Cerberus or one of the Solarian bastards manages to kill her. And if she died, so did the hopes of a genophage cure. Then we need to leave. Revan decided. How long until Shepard is done in the lower levels? They already have the female moving through the quarantine procedure. Rex said. But the elevator was trapped, a bomb. They're leaving through an emergency exit and won't be able to meet up with us. A bomb in a secure base. Either Cerberus had some of the best infiltrators around to sneak that in before their attack, or it was another sign they had been betrayed. Though the question by who remained. A deniable attack by the Dultras or an indoctrinated agent of the Reapers? The quarantine cells open at the landing pad. Revan remembered from a conversation with one of their minders about the Yarg being moved down into the base. We'll meet them there. I'll get the shuttle. And do my best to make life miserable for Cerberus. Revan nodded and ignited one of her sabers. I'll help clear the base then, draw as many of their soldiers away as possible. Oh. Contact. More Cerberus just up ahead. Garrus barked before opening up with his blaster rifle. 2 Cerberus troops fell over with smoking holes in their armor before the others made it behind cover and returned fire. Shepard dove behind a metal support beam. Liara, singularity. On it. The sphere of biotic power dragged the remaining soldiers from behind their own cover before Shepard detonated the whole thing with a shockwave. One explosion later and the squad was wiped out and her own team was moving on. This was the 3rd squad they had run into and honestly the only reason Shepard and her team were able to cut through them so quickly is that the base's layout and defenses basically forced Cerberus's dropships to drop off one squad at a time. In areas with almost no cover too. The resulting shooting gallery was a godsend for now, but eventually enough squads would establish themselves that they would begin to converge and overrun the defenders. Shepard needed to get the Krogan female to safety before that happened, hopefully without getting the rest of them killed in the process since it seemed Cerberus somehow managed to sneak in a goddamned army. Thankfully she didn't need to worry about all that entirely by herself. Rex was going to meet them at the landing bay and Revan was apparently going to distract Cerberus. All Shepard and her team needed to focus on was getting the female there. She made a promise the Krogan would make it back to Tukanka. She intended to see it through. Everyone good? She called out, getting 2 positive responses. Then let's keep moving. Liara consulted a map on her Omnitool. There's a route to the next level through the labs. You should have access to enter those too. It will definitely save us time getting back to the containment unit. We better hurry too. Garrus added. The female isn't going to last long against this much firepower. Mordin will let us know if there's any trouble. Shepard said confidently. And wasn't that a surprise? A nice one to be sure, but it had been a bit of a shock to realize the insider agent that had leaked the existence of the females in the first place was an old crew member and the one scientist with the best chance of creating a cure. Shepard would love to hear the story of how he managed to pull that one off when they weren't in the middle of a massive terrorist attack. The Spectre quickly found the entrance to the labs and after a quick check confirmed she actually did have clearance to enter, led her team through the connecting rooms. Most were empty save for some discarded equipment, but 2 had contained some living creatures in them. The first were several Varan that the Solarians had been trying to experiment on, something about chemical markers to make them easily controllable. They were also considered a failure and marked to be terminated since the treatment was going to kill them in a few days, so Shepard had no qualms about releasing them just as a Cerberus squad passed by the cages. It was the other cages she had no intention of going near. Not 1 but 2 Yarg specimens were staring hatefully at the 3 of them from behind the force field. And considering the one she saw earlier and the empty active cage next to them meant there was a potential third somewhere on the base. A third that was potentially loose and wreaking havoc on both the Solarians and Cerberus. Species 732 authorized for covered uplift. Garrus read from the nearby terminal. Apparently they are ideal candidates to expand Solarian influence with full deniability. They called it a minimal risk. Obviously they never had to fight a Yarg face-to-face. Liara grumbled. It looks like a third one might be missing. A few STG might be learning what that's like right now. Shepard pointed out. As long as we don't run into it, that's fine by me. And if they decide to push forward with that project, I know a few contacts that would be plenty happy to receive a tip from a concerned source about the Solarians breaking Citadel law. Shepard hid a smile at that. It was still a bit weird to see the sheltered archaeologist turned shadow broker casually threaten things like that, but at the same time Liara had really grown into the role. That smile died a swift death when the team opened the door out of the labs and found a Cerberus squad waiting for them. That wasn't the concerning part, though. No, that was because the previously missing Yarg made its appearance by tearing around a corner and ripping a soldier in half before grabbing a second and shoving him halfway through the wall and roaring out a challenge. The remaining 2 reflexively opened fire, but the soldier getting shoved through the wall must have ruptured some sort of gas pipe because a jet of fire suddenly filled the hallway, incinerating the remaining soldiers and blocking the Yarg from continuing forward. Whatever that gas was burned hot enough that the massive alien decided to run back the way it came. Gone just as quickly as it arrived. Well, that happened. Shepard muttered, trying to process the explosion of violence before attempting to inject a little levity into their situation. Careful. There goes the next shadow broker. Yeah, could have sworn he was muttering Sony the whole time. Garrus added in, getting a full-body shiver from their third. Not funny. It's a little funny. Batarian disagreed. Liara narrowed her eyes at him. I'll send Taylor your extranet search history. Huh? Why? Garrus stuttered, and as much as Shepard wanted to burst out laughing at the poor guy's dumbstruck face, they were on the clock right now. All right, as fun as this is, let's get moving. Mordin is waiting on us. Don't think I don't have something on you, Shepard. Liara threatened as she followed after the commander. Revan watched dispassionately as the headless body of the last Cerberus trooper she encountered slumped to the floor, the edges of his neck armor glowing a soft orange from where her lightsaber had cut through. That was the 7th squad she had cut her way through, and yet there had been no discernible attempts to either properly engage or avoid her. And in her experience that meant there was either no plans to deal with any disruptions that didn't risk their main objective, or Revan was about to walk into a trap. She triggered her calms. Shepard, how long until you've secured the Krogan? We are moving as fast as we can, but Cerberus damaged the lift. We're dealing with 2 squads at least and a heavy mech. Shepard yelled back over the sound of gunfire. If you're not busy, we could use a hand. Revan was about to reply when the sound of several lightsabers igniting at once cut her off. It appears something just came up. You will have to deal without me. The Sith lady ended the call and turned to look at her opponents. Well, isn't this an unpleasant surprise? Oh. Revan? Shepard bit back a curse and ducked as more gunfire whizzed over her head. It looked like they were on their own. If it had just been Cerberus soldiers it would have been one thing, but they had managed to sneak in an Atlas mech somehow. The machine had her whole squad pinned, and if they didn't take it out soon, it was going to destroy the Krogan's pod and any chance they had at a genophage cure. She made a motion at Liara and waited a moment as her squad mate tossed a singularity at a few of the remaining troopers before collapsing back behind cover. Shepard distantly noted that Liara had been throwing around advanced biotics almost non-stop and was hitting her limit. More actively she was barking orders at Garrus. They had a limited window of time to act before they were fully boxed in and picked off. "Burn its shields now," she yelled, already firing at the Atlas as quickly as her M23 katana could cycle. "On it." Garrus called back and opened fire with his blaster rifle. "How you plan on getting through the armor though?" Shepard was still working on that part. They had been expecting a quick escort mission, not a heavy assault against heavy-class mechs. They didn't have anything meant to punch through that level of armor, damn it. "Not yet. Just try aiming for the canopy." She didn't have high hopes of even Garrus's rifle melting through the heavily reinforced material unless the Atlas decided to stand still for a while, but hopefully the flashes of red would disorient the pilot a bit. Now she needed to find a way to kill it. Her eyes scanned the battlefield. If Cerberus was serious about breaching the pod before it reached the landing bay, they would have needed heavy weapons. There. A dead trooper that had been carrying a rocket launcher. A quick biotic pull had the weapon in her grasp, but the bad news was there were only 2 shots. Enough to damage the outer armor, but extremely unlikely to completely shut down the mech unless she scored a direct hit twice in the same spot. Actually, that gave her an idea. "Liara, you doing okay?" Shepard asked as she planned her next move. "I'm fine, Shepard. But I don't think I have many more singularities in me." "That's fine, what about a precision warp?" "Easily, but that won't be enough to destroy such a heavily armored." Liara trailed off when she saw what Shepard was doing with one of the remaining missiles. "Shepard, no. That's insane." "Only if it doesn't work," Shepard retorted. "Now get ready, we're probably only going to get one shot at this." Ignoring Liara's attempt at a protest, Shepard waited until the Atlas turned to aim where Garrus was still putting bolt after bolt into its canopy to shoulder the rocket launcher and fire a shot at the plating just under the mech's left arm where the armor was thinner. It hit, and to Shepard's relief, she could see the hole in the metal plating. Great. They still had a chance. Pushing down the voice in her head that was screaming this was a terrible idea with the ease of long practice, Shepard vaulted over the divider she had been using as cover and triggered a biotic charge straight towards the Atlas. The mech shifted to target her, forcing her to duck under a flailing limb as she jumped onto the chassis and held on tightly. She only had a few moments before the pilot realized what she was doing, so the second she was stable, she pulled out the second rocket she had covered in Omnigel and shoved it as deep into the hole in the plating as possible. A quick electric pulse from her Omnitool essentially welded the missile in place half a second before the Atlas pilot moved and knocked her off. Now Liara. A heartbeat later the missile was wrapped up by a bright blue corona of dark energy and exploded as the shifting biotic fields triggered the warhead just under the Atlas's protective plating and doing far more damage than a single missile should do to a heavy mech. It just wasn't enough. The Atlas was still moving. Shepard scrambled to move even as she stared down the barrel of the mech's mass accelerator cannon, knowing even a near miss would reduce her to a red smear on the floor. So thank God, Buddha, or even Revan's mysterious force that before the pilot could pull the trigger a red energy bolt streaked into the now much wider hole in the mech and hit something important. The mech locked up as systems overloaded and Shepard briefly saw the pilot fighting with the controls before the Atlas detonated with the force of a small bomb. The Spectre was knocked head over heels into a wall from the blast wave, but she was still alive. "Shepard, you all right?" Liara was by her side in seconds, running a medical program on her Omnitool. Garrus wasn't far behind, though he was more focused on scanning their surroundings for any remaining Cerberus troops. Yeah, a little tender, but I think I'm fine. She grunted out. Besides, my plan worked great, right? If you mean the string of lucky coincidences that you not only managed to secure an eyed in a very small hole, that Liara was able to detonate it despite the safeties built into the missile to stop it from doing exactly that when hit by biotics, and that I happen to have a somewhat clear shot with a rifle that uses concentrated plasma instead of normal ammunition, then yes, it was foolproof. Gara said dryly and looked at Liara. How did you manage to cause that explosion anyway? Shepard disabled the safeties beforehand. The Asari grumbled. She's lucky her charge didn't set anything off. Ah, more of her brand of insanity then. That makes sense. Shepard glared at the both of them. If you're done picking on me, we've got a Krogan to secure. Liara, call Rex and let him know we cleared the landing site. Garrus, keep an eye out for more Cerberus. I'm going to try and get a hold of Revan again. I don't like that we've heard nothing from her since we lost contact. You got it, Commander. Both her squad mates straightened up as they focused back on the mission. While they split off to do as she ordered, Shepard glanced out over the increasingly damaged-looking facility, wondering what exactly had managed to hold Revan up for so long. Oh! Revan leaned back as a glowing blade narrowly missed her throat. Another stabbed towards her leg that she parried with a small twirl of one of her own lightsabers. A third assailant moved to try attacking the Sith lady from behind, but a burst of Force lightning forced them to back off. I was a bit worried when I saw that Cerberus managed to create a lightsaber design of its own. But if this is the extent of your knockoffs, then I must say I'm disappointed. Revan said coldly to her 7 remaining opponents. In fact, I might go as far to say it is more a mockery than an effective weapon design. She wasn't exaggerating that last part either. When she had turned to find 10 lightsaber-wielding opponents, she had initially been cautious. Even if the blades looked like ancient proto-saber designs that had fallen out of use millennia ago in her own galaxy, a lightsaber was a lightsaber. In the hands of a skilled enough warrior, it could cut down almost any opponent. There was a reason they remained the iconic weapons of Jedi and Sith after thousands of years. But the things Cerberus had deployed against her? They barely deserved the name. Not when out of the 3 dead assailants, Revan had only killed 2. The third had burned to death when the power pack connected to the blade overloaded and exploded from the operative blocking too much in quick succession. With that limitation in mind, it made sense why Cerberus deployed these saber wielders in such a large group. It wasn't specifically because they thought Revan was a large enough threat 10 operatives were needed, but that they needed around that many to allow individuals to swap out and bleed off the heat building up in their power packs. Otherwise Revan could simply overload the packs by attacking one person at a time until the packs overloaded. Something the Cerberus agent seemed well aware of, because unlike the troopers' bulky armor, their suits were much lighter and more flexible, and they seemed to prefer assassination-style strikes rather than any actual saber fighting. I don't believe the elusive man is deluded enough to believe something like this would be enough to kill me. Revan said aloud. Which means I was not your initial target. So I wonder, what were you all supposed to be here for? Revan wasn't expecting an answer. Even the most basic Cerberus troopers implanted with Reaper technology were poor conversationalists. This group had been modified much more extensively, going by the amount of metal Revan had cut through when killing 2 of them. She would be very surprised if any of them were capable of more than doggedly carrying out their orders. Even extensive torture would likely be borderline useless at extracting information, even if Revan had the time or inclination for it. No matter, Cerberus went through the effort to send those toys all the way out here. Revan said, raising her own sabers into a ready position. I may as well show you how far your scientists still have to go. A burst of speed put the Sith directly in front of one of the Cerberus cyborgs. It was telling how fragile their weapons really were that the agent tried to dodge instead of using his saber defensively. The protective barrier around him held for only a brief moment before Revan's red saber cut through his heart. The female agent that was the Sith's next target learned from that at least and managed to parry 2 of Revan's attacks before 3 others rushed to intervene. Revan's blades whirled around her in intricate patterns of light to fend off the rush of attacks, mentally counting down how many strikes each blade had left before they risked exploding. It quickly became hard to keep track though, because one agent would cycle out when Revan estimated they had half a dozen strikes left with one of the remaining observers. But if they planned on simply outlasting her, Revan had a nasty surprise for them. While she very rarely ever found herself facing numbers like this, she had dueled several Jedi Knights and even Masters at once on her own before. And they had been much more dangerous than these indoctrinated cyborgs could ever be. Revan sidestepped a lunge from behind and almost casually sliced upwards at her attacker's arm, severing it halfway below the elbow. Continuing her sideways motion, Revan pivoted so her recently disarmed opponent was between her and another attacker. The attacker didn't seem to care they were about to slash through their fellow agent. At least they didn't until Revan grabbed the still-ignited proto-saber in a telekinetic grip and guided it up into the attacker's chest while she stabbed the first agent through the back with her own saber. Reduced to less than half their original number, it became clear to the remaining Cerberus agents there was little hope they would be able to defeat Revan, yet she couldn't sense even a hint of flicker of emotion from any of them as they threw themselves at the Sith in a fashion eerily similar to the collector drones. Revan sidestepped a stab, blocked a slash, parried another so it forced the fourth opponent to dodge or impale themselves on their ally's saber. A counter-slash was blocked, an incoming attack parried, a near miss on an agent that stumbled backwards, slash, parry, stab, block, riposte, one of the remaining agents fell to the ground with a burning gouge across their chest, slash, stab, parry, a jump to the side followed by a force push as an agent attempted to use their power pack overloading as an improvised explosive, slash, parry, slash. And then there was one. Revan said lightly as the Cerberus agent she just attacked split in 2, bisected from shoulder to hip. But it seems you discovered the design flaw that made proto-sabers a relic of the past. She looked at the severed power cord dangling from the now useless saber hilt. Revan had deliberately not targeted the glaring weak point until now for one reason only. She needed information. Reaching out a hand towards the final agent, Revan focused on the force and used the most complete stasis she could. A shimmering energy field appeared over the agent that prevented them from moving at all. There would be no last stand, no attempt to escape, and no suicide attempt to deny Revan what she was after. After all, while Revan was disinclined to use torture to gain information. Now then, let's see what Cerberus was hoping to gain with this little attack, she muttered, placing a hand on the frozen agent's head. She had little need to rely on such crude methods. Not with the power of the Force on her side.